Welcome, Flyers Nitty Gritty fans, to Getting Gritty with It with your host, Yariv, Wolok, and my partner in crime for the afternoon is my friend from Flyers Face Off, Kevin Fortier. Kevin, welcome to the show, buddy.
Hey, Yariv, thanks for having me on again, man. It's always fun to talk to you.
Yeah, it's been a while, and I think it's an appropriate time because you brought up a topic that we're going to go over today, Phil Myers. And I think I love talking about Phil Myers. And right now I love defending players because it's fun for me because everybody likes throwing players away as soon as they struggle. So, and I don't believe in any of that. So I think you're a perfect guy to come on right now with the tone of everything that's going on. And then, you know, what's going on with Seth Jones and everything. I just think it's rather appropriate.
Sounds good. Look forward to it.
Before I continue, though, let me give a quick shout out to our sponsor, Jim Steaks. I bring it up every time. They are Flyers fans. It's a big reason why we work with them. We are working on a live show with them. As the date we picked, they are going to be mobbed. So we're going to try to figure out some kind of live event there. If it doesn't happen this summer, we're going to do it probably like preparation for next year. Maybe we'll do something around the draft, but we'll try to figure it out. I'll put out a date for that. But remember, check out Jim Steaks on South. Again, they have awesome cheesesteaks and definitely support them. And now that COVID is passing over, it's even easier to get food from there and they survive. So yeah, I love that. Yeah, agreed.
Thank you, Lord.
Totally agree, man. And yeah, just make sure to check out Jim Steaks. Ken over there treats us very well. So make sure to check them out. All right. Let's get started. First, let's start off with, I guess, the biggest news of today's date as we're filming this. This is June 7th. So Ian Laperriere has been named, and this was rumored in the background as Scott Gordon and Kerry Huffman kind of departed. Mostly it seems like contractual issues, and I don't blame them. He's one of the best coaches in the AHL. So Scott Gordon's kind of like, if I'm not going to get a multi-year deal and I'm not going to get a promise, you know, I have better opportunities up there. And quite frankly, he probably does. You know, why he's not getting that opportunity is also, I do want to talk about that. But let's talk about it. Ian Laperriere gets named head coach of the Phantoms. He's been an assistant coach for a long time. He has no experience being head coach, but he has been part of this organization for a long time. And I brought this up on previous episodes, Kevin, that Ian Laperriere, and you probably know this as well, he is a fitness freak. I mean, the guy runs marathons on his own. He is highly focused on conditioning. And I've been talking about this for a while. The Flyers were not conditioned well enough. And not just the Flyers, some of the young guys, especially the young guys, I would say, they did not come into it. So I think the goal is from top down throughout the entire organization is to make this team the most conditioned team in the NHL. It's a big feat to ask, but at least make that the push. Kevin, what do you think about Lappy getting named as coach?
Well, I was somewhat vocal about this morning on Twitter. I was shocked to see that, was really not happy about it. I've been an outspoken critic of his. I labeled him as the worst penalty killing coach in NHL history on several occasions. So I'm a little bit worried. Yeah, he's a great conditioning guy. He's a great guy in the locker room. He obviously, you know, was a great guy on the ice for the Flyers when he was here, bled all over the ice on multiple occasions for the Flyers. I just worry about him being in charge of our young prospects coming up. And like you said, he has no head coaching experience. And I just think he was a complete failure as a penalty killing coach. How many years were they at the bottom without ever making any adjustments?
Well, let me ask you something, and it is a concern. I think a lot of people had a concern about that when he was in charge of it, right? Especially under Hackstall. What do you think about somebody like Yo, though, going from top of the league and then all of a sudden our PK, and clearly different conditions, but, you know, we dropped considerably in PK production. I mean, we were awful to the same point that I would say we were with Lappy. Do you think it's a little bit more than just Lappy? Or do you think it was kind of thrown all on him a little bit?
Well, I mean, he was in charge for what, three and a half years under Hackstall?
Something like that.
And it was abysmal. Then AV comes in. They make strides AV's first year, and then, like you said, this year just the bottom fell out again, and they were right back at the bottom of the league. So there probably are some bigger systemic issues for whatever reason. The Flyers can't seem to kill penalties, in the last decade. They also completely forgot how to score shorthanded goals. They got their first shorthanded goal of the season in the last game of the season.
When it didn't matter.
Right, exactly. And they barely had any shorthanded goals for the last 4 or 5 years. There probably is more to it than just him. It did get significantly better, like I said, in AV's first year, and then for whatever reason, it went right back to the way it was. But that and the lack of head coaching experience, it does worry me a little bit.
So let's get into that actually, because that's what concerns me about it. I'm okay with the fact that his PK didn't do well in the NHL because this is a lower level of hockey, and I think this is an opportunity for him to groom that side of his game where the level of competition won't be as high. He was obviously a fantastic penalty killer himself, but that doesn't always translate. Like Wayne Gretzky wasn't a great coach.
Yeah.
He was pretty average coach, right? Amazing player, wasn't a great coach. So he does have some coaching ability though, especially with young guys that we do know. So I'm thinking maybe they're hoping that they can supplement certain aspects of his coaching style with assistant coaches. Those haven't been named so far. An early name that's been thrown out is Nick Shultz. Now, Nick Shultz also was a former captain. He's currently with the organization now doing some player development. And he is probably also a good penalty killer with minimal coaching experience as well. Do you think adding somebody like that, and I know Terry Murray's name was thrown around. I don't know if he's going to jump for an AHL job, but maybe bringing in a coach, like a guy who used to be a coach, to supplement, would that make you more comfortable if that was the case?
Yeah, if they could bring somebody in who has some coaching heft to them to shore up that aspect and, let Lappy be the guy that's, pushing on conditioning and, works well with young kids, et cetera. With Shultz also not having any real coaching experience, I definitely would want a couple other assistant coaches in there that do have some experience to make that a better unit.
Yeah. And that's why I think if they do add somebody like Terry Murray, and obviously and he always gets thrown around, but he was a good coach. If you do add Terry Murray with Lappy and Nick Shultz, that's actually, to me, I think he can supplement that.
I think that'd be good. That'd be solid.
Yeah. I think that is important though. I think it's a good point because there's going to be some lessons learned there going on for Lappy. He's been around the organization for a while. Let me ask you this, and this is why I brought up that Scott Gordon thing earlier. Scott Gordon's a good coach. Okay. He's clearly a good AHL coach, right? He did a good job in the NHL. He's at least an average NHL coach. You can even say below average, though I would say he's at least an average, right?
Yeah.
So we know he's a good coach and they didn't want to give him term. I think about why. Is it a financial issue? Potentially, right? I don't think so because we're a pretty wealthy team. And it tells me, is there some kind of plan in place that kind of like a wait and see with Fletcher as well? And that's why they went with somebody like Lappy, where I don't think they'll necessarily fire him if it doesn't work out, because we've seen if it doesn't work out, they just shift him over. They don't want to fire him, right? They love him. So maybe the idea is, hey, he's kind of been waiting. We have an opportunity here. We have this 1 year gap where, for whatever reason, we didn't want to extend Gordon. We're kind of in wait and see mode. Do you think it has anything to do with that?
It's possible because it is a little puzzling why they wouldn't want to extend Gordon because, like you said, he's done a good job for them with the Phantoms. He came up, did the interim head coaching gig, and then went back down to the minors, like a good soldier, picked, right up where he left off. Obviously, it was a bizarre season this year, but they were a good team this year. They looked, they played really well.
And he played young guys consistently too. It's not like he just favored veterans.
No, which is something, that's big for me. But, you would think that there's got to be something else going on there, like you said, and maybe they didn't want to see, maybe they had something they wanted to do with Lappy, give him a chance to show some chops in a coaching position. And if it doesn't work, then they look at bringing, in a named AHL coach. and stick, like you said, just stick Lappy somewhere else.
Yeah, it's weird and that's what I was thinking about. It's almost like they didn't have the commitment. Maybe it's from ownership. Maybe they were like, hey, look, if this team and at the NHL and AHL level, if we don't see the strides that we want, we're gonna flip people over. I mean, maybe Fletcher survives, right? But they were like, hey, we're gonna want a new coaching staff. Because I've worked for Comcast. I actually think Dave Scott's actually been very reasonable publicly. I think his attitude's been he's been quiet for the most part. He's made a couple comments, but he's not really saying or doing much. But they're a very wealthy organization. If they want to get rid of people and bring in new, they won't hesitate to do that. And that's why I kind of got that feeling a little bit that this is like, hey, we might get rid of a bunch of people if you guys don't, like, we don't care if the Phantoms are good. Like we need your coaching staff. So maybe that's kind of what Fletcher's thinking is like, I don't want to bring in a guy that might not be here beyond this year anyway. A brand new guy. I don't know. Just kind of throwing that out there.
Yeah, I mean, because certainly you would think, you would hope that the Flyers are not going to be satisfied with continuing to be, mediocre and 1 year in the playoffs, 1 year missed, 1 year
doubtful.
I mean, that's just that cannot continue. So hopefully they are of a new mindset now that it's not a plan anymore. We need success.
Yep, totally. And so I think we will see that. Again, I've harped on this for a while. I think this expansion draft has been something that Fletcher has been working around, because if you look at the previous offseason, he was very aggressive and he went quickly. And this past offseason, he just went Erik Gustafsson. You know what I mean? And we're harsh on Gustafsson, but Jamie's been retweeting this constantly. Like Gustafsson is with Montreal. You know what I mean?
Playing.
Right. So that's on us. That's our org that didn't compete well as a whole. Maybe he's not what we needed. He wasn't what we needed, quite frankly. But that's on us. You're supposed to be able to squeeze talent out of everything you got, and we did not do that this year. So
but he continues to struggle. In game one against Winnipeg, they were on the power play. He turned, he tried to take a shot that he never should have tried to take. It got blocked, and then he just let, I think it was Adam Lowry, just blow right by him, score.
Yeah.
And he sat, I think, the entire third period of that game. I mean, he did not get a shift in the third period of so because you could, and you were seeing in the games against Toronto as well, his regular turnovers. He is a turnover machine, but he's good on the power play.
That's exactly what I was going to say. He's a power play specialist.
Yeah,
go ahead. I'm sorry. Exactly.
No, other than that major faux pas that led to a shorthanded goal, which in the end didn't end up mattering anyway. But he's typically good on the power play. He can move the puck when he doesn't turn. He can skate the puck out of the zone and get the puck up ice, which nobody on the Flyers seems to do other than Ghost. It's like they all completely forgot how to do that. They just stand around looking at each other like, crap, what do I do now? And then they pass it back and forth, and then the forecheck comes in, and then they end up losing possession. But yeah,
that's
he definitely was what they need.
Well, that's to that point that you brought up Ghost. That's what I felt like Gustafsson was here for, is that he was just insurance for Ghost. Like, that's really how I took it, because he's similar age, not even similar. I mean, similar skill set in some respect, but as soon as Ghost was like, I never thought Gustafsson was as good as Ghost, especially when Ghost is in his prime. Gustafsson just has, Gustafsson's got offensive skill set, like you said. But on a team like Montreal, they don't necessarily have the power play guys. So for them, it's they're much more willing to be like, okay, we'll shelter the power play guy and let him just play the power play for us, because they have a bigger physical defense, and they brought in Edmondson. They have Shea Weber, who I wish we had him. That's the type of guy we need to lead this defense. We need a veteran of that caliber. I don't know, but we definitely need a guy like that. So let me ask you this, and let's go to the NHL level real quick. So Lappy's out. We typically do have another coach. We usually have a fourth, right? 3 assistants.
Right.
I don't see them not replacing him. Do you think that that's the case? Do you think they're going to bring in another veteran coach?
Honestly, I don't know. We were all kind of calling them the dream team last year. 3 successful head coaches, all under one roof. And it looked like they were squeezing every ounce of talent out of the Flyers in the second half of last year and going into the bubble. And the round robin games, I mean, they just continued to dominate. And then this year, all the wheels fell off the bus and nothing worked. I mean, I've got a chart in my article on Phil Myers that shows everything was down year to year. Literally everything was down.
Yeah.
And to your point, are we in a 1 year holding period and then they're potentially making more changes? Do they bring somebody in during that period and then end up potentially cleaning house afterwards again? I don't know. Do they really need that position? I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's the Lappy thing. I feel like it goes like, okay, Lappy knows these coaches. He's worked with them directly. He knows their expectations of the players above, and the coaches above. So this is like a cohesion move in my mind. Like they're almost like, hey, we're going to sync up our AHL team even more to our NHL team, and they're going to play the exact same system that AV essentially has in place. But I do see a case where you don't see much progress on the power play over the past couple of years for Terrian. And again, he's been all right with the offense necessarily, but like the power play has not evolved enough. It's not that it's been horrendous, but it hasn't been good and it hasn't improved, right? No. At all. At least you'll say, hey, he really improved it the first year, and then just, you know what I mean? Like high, low. And I feel like with Terrian, it's like nothing. So I think that there is an opportunity here to maybe bring in, I don't know if he's a replacement for anybody. I don't want to jump ahead to that. But, I don't think Rick Tocchet would take this job or anything like that. But there might be another guy out there who's looking for an assistant coach job, who's just a smart guy. Maybe he'll come in for a year and they can throw him in there and be like, hey, help us evaluate our special teams. Help us evaluate, like another eye to get in here to be like, hey, we know what's going on, but maybe you're bringing some fresh ideas. So I think like that's the opportunity. But having said that, like, I don't know who that guy would be, to your point.
Yeah. It's shocking that the Flyers power play has not evolved since like 2012. It hasn't changed at all.
Joey Mullen. We talk about all the time. That's the last time it was really had its stuff together.
Yeah. And in the previous years, at least they had Hartnell, and then they had Shen in that bumper slot.
Yep.
And that was basically, it was either they were scoring their goals there or Simmons was getting the net front stuff.
Well, I think to correct you there, I do think Coots, when he had that, I think it was 37 goals he put up that year. He did play that first year.
But then they went away from it again. And now it's nothing from behind the net, working out from behind the net. Just no creativity whatsoever. And it's like everybody knows exactly what the Flyers are going to do on the power play. And you wonder why it doesn't succeed.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I agree. I was talking about this though, the other throughout the year, actually. The predictability of it is like, I think it's okay that it's predictable. To me, it's more like it used to execute really fast. Like the passes were quick. They get this. Yeah. Now it's like, to this guy, to that guy, who's going to shoot? I don't know.
Nobody wants to shoot.
Yeah, and that's new. I would prefer Giroux shooting every time. Like everybody knows what Ovechkin's going to do. I bring it up all the time. Yeah. He's still going to do it, and he's still going to score. Yeah. So it's almost like you have to be precise. And I feel like that's also what I haven't seen. It's like the predictability plus lack of precision is just, we're getting how many odd man chances this year because of that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, and like you were talking about moving the puck quickly, it's these soft passes, and you get 1,000, 2 1,000, and then 3 1,000. The puck gets to the guy. Look at the teams that are successful: Vegas, Colorado, Tampa, Carolina. They fire that puck back, side to side, so the goalies can't keep up with anything, and that's when they score the goal because they get the goalie out of position. Because they go, side to side, back to front, and they were able to get that puck moving around, and the Flyers just don't have any of that.
Yeah, and I think, obviously, it's an excuse, but like I think the lack of practice definitely added to that. Other teams didn't have as much practice either, but it's like the combination of like all the changes, with the lack of practice, it's like nobody really executed quickly. By the end, you have Konechny playing in front of the net, and I'm like, I get it. He's good at deflecting pucks, but he's 5'10". Why are we putting him there? We have big, strong guys. Like, why isn't Couturier there? Why isn't JVR the only guy? Why aren't we adapting to the best, our strongest suits? Like, I feel like that wasn't there. And again, I'm willing to excuse everything, probably more than most, because I'm like, okay, I saw a good 1 year, bad the next, so I want to see how they adjust. But the power play really frustrates me. I don't hate Terry in any way, but I was definitely not the biggest fan of him coming into here. So now that I don't see the power play evolve at all, I'm willing to forgive, but I still, like, if I see the third year and the power play doesn't evolve, I'm going, that's you. That's you now. There's enough talent here for this power play to be good.
Well, and there's so much talent for the penalty kill to not be 30th in the league year after year after year.
Well, how does that happen? So let's talk about that for a second. Let's forget everybody else on the team. Sean Couturier, nobody doubts how good this guy is defensively. Yeah. Nobody. And I actually would argue, Giroux's very good as well, but he's obviously getting older, and he's also not like the biggest, strongest guy. And Lindblom, obviously with his injury, I think Lindblom is also an exceptional two-way player. We have Kevin Hayes, who was dealing with an injury most of the year, like 60% of the year. We have Lawton, who we know is a good defensive guy. Farabee, who's young, but is also a good defensive guy. Like, what happened? What do you think happened? Like, it was completely ineffective.
Yeah. I think it seemed like they collapsed, and they were almost timid out there at times.
Very.
They would get pushed back, and the teams just, I don't know. And the lack of speed on the penalty kill, I think, was a detriment as well. I still, Jamie and I were big on this a couple years ago. They were Hacksaw was like, "Oh, we're going to put Konechny on the penalty kill." He did that for like a game and a half in preseason. I would love to see it. And he never played again on the penalty
with
kill.
Couturier.
Yeah. Why wouldn't you have them out there? Remember Richards and Reed and Giroux. I mean, the guys that we had on the PK that were constantly a scoring threat the other way, and they were so quick. They would interrupt passes. They were all over the place, getting sticks in lanes, etc. Get Farabee and Konechny, and Lindblom's not a super fast guy. Lawton's got decent speed. Mm-hmm. Like you said, Konechny's Couturier is just a defensive stud out there, mm-hmm. and he's huge, and he can get he can work his stick to disrupt things well. But you got to have some speed out there. You got to get up, and you got to challenge the guys on the back end there, and make them force them to create turnovers or just bad passes, and you just get in those lanes. You get on the puck, and boom, you go.
Do you think that problem, because you said it really well in the beginning, that they seem very timid? I think that's where the lack of speed comes from, is that they're not like confident that they're going to get that puck from the guy at the point. They're going to block it, and they're going to take it the other way. They almost like they clutch, they go and they second gear, and then they hold back, and then they allow the guy to make the pass. I saw that so often where they kind of allowed the teams to play perimeter, and then not just go perimeter, they would throw that puck down low, and then obviously the defense was struggling this year as well. Yep. So it's like the combination of that, I think, is what killed it.
And this is like, I've never been a huge Sam Morin guy. I never wanted Morin, but we've got him. I think they need to use him, or get somebody like him in front of the net and clear bodies. Mm-hmm. How many times did you see the other team get in there, take a shot, they get a little bit of a rebound, they poke and they find on a second or third chance that the puck would go in the net? You got to have somebody out there that's going to clear the crease and not allow second, third, fourth chances on the goaltender, because that's when they were scoring a lot of goals too.
Yeah. You know what? I want to talk about, we're going to talk about Phil Myers later, because we're going to talk about your article, but I think he can be a guy who will evolve into that. I think he's not quite ready. Where do you think, you brought up Sam Morin here, and then we'll go on to the next topic. he's obviously, I think, a restricted free agent, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah, restricted. So I personally think that they should sign him if he's willing to accept the type of deal we can offer him. Obviously, we can't offer him the world. I think he will, and I love his personality. And I think losing 2 years of hockey, I think he's got some work to do to get back to where it was. But we saw flashes of that meanness. And even when he came back, players were more confident with him on the ice and on the bench. I do think that it's important. I like Robert Haig. I'm not like a hater of his, but I would rather have a Sam Morin than Robert Haig, especially as my 7, or even a 6, a guy that like he's just more physically dominating. Do you see an opportunity there for maybe him to be the long-term guy, and maybe a guy like Robert Haig might get moved, or maybe he's a guy who gets taken in expansion?
Yeah, well, and I actually, in the roster I put together out on Cap Friendly, I moved Haig and I signed Sam Morin as the 7th D.
Okay, so we're on the same page.
I think he wants to stay. I think he thinks.
I think so too.
He bleeds orange and black. I said after a while, because I was so frustrated with the way AV was using him, I was like, he should just refuse to sign here and just go and get a chance somewhere. But to your point, I think he has probably one of, if not the best stick on the Flyers defense. And I'm not just talking because, he's got an 18-foot wingspan.
I agree with you.
He uses that stick so well to break up plays. He keeps guys to the outside. I think he can be a solid 6D and a penalty killer specialist on I think he's ideal for that role.
And he can punch people in the face if you really
and that too. And that too.
And he fills that need. And he'll take only a little bit of money. I can tell you, my gut instinct tells me if he is a unrestricted free agent, he will get signed like that. I know most people probably don't agree with that. He just missing those 2 years. It's not enough for a team to be like, oh yeah, he doesn't have it. And a team like Montreal definitely wanted him.
Montreal always,
they'll jump on him right now. They would jump him immediately.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I think we're on the same page with that one. And again, I like Robert Haig, but I think we're getting into a numbers game.
Right.
We're getting a numbers game, and a guy like York, I've been harping on him for a while. I mean, he is not going to be in the AHL next year. If he will be, it's going to be for a very short amount of time. We already saw him come up to the. I don't want him to be a top pairing guy here or anything. I don't want to come here and save the world. But the odds of him not making the NHL, I just can't see it. He is ahead of a lot of the players already. And we saw he played 20 minutes when he played in that, in his showcase. And I was even listening to an interview with, again, I always talk about this, Martinez interviewing Brent Fleur. He always has the best interviews. And, he was kind of like, Martinez was going like, oh, you didn't want York to go out in that kind of way. And Fleur was kind of like, yeah, it wasn't like the way we drew it up, but he did great. So it's not like they're not going to look at him and be like, oh, shelter him. The kid is just like Farabee. People thought Farabee needed sheltering. This U.S. program, they develop mature hockey players who put in the work. They act like adults. He didn't get named captain for no reason. So I think we're hitting a numbers game here. And even on the wings, we're hitting a numbers game. Guys have to move. Otherwise, we're going to get punished, at the lower levels. Like we even saw, and we'll talk about it. Actually, we can talk about it. Well, we'll talk about it next. We even saw Sandstrom like moving on, right? So
that. Well, like I said, we're going to talk about that, but that really upset me. But to your point, I mean, you've got York. You also got Zamula, and
he might be ready.
So where does Haig fit in? Why do you need a Robert Haig as opposed to you've got these other guys who are more talented, who are better skaters, and then you've got Sam Morin, who is bigger and tougher and has a better stick, and he can punch people in the face.
Yeah. I will say, I do think Haig has another level to his game. He's just about that age right now where he's played enough games, but that doesn't mean he's going to fit into a role here necessarily. And that's kind of where I'm like, he has value. That's why I actually think expansion draft, he might be the guy. He's going to be cheap. They know they can play him in a number 6 spot. You can move him. You can get probably a 3rd round pick for him if you need to trade him. So I don't know if the Flyers are excited to move anybody, and they're probably kind of just like, well, let's wait and see who we lose. And if they lose Ghost, then it's Ghost. Then they got to adjust to that. But I do see an opportunity here where, maybe even halfway through the season, they're like, okay, York is ready or Zamula is ready. I think it'll be York over Zamula, but I just see a numbers game. We're not going to be carrying 9 defensemen all the time. It's not sustainable, and there's not going to be any taxi cab squad, next year. So I think that's out. I do want to talk about Sandstrom, but first let's talk about this. I want to bring this up because I feel like online this is not the story. I don't know if you'll agree with me, but I actually think this should help the Flyers' case. The Flyers are in the toughest division, in my opinion, the toughest division in hockey from depth, top down. Yes, the best team is probably Tampa Bay, the Avs, Vegas. You could say Boston, right? But like you saw what Boston is doing to the Islanders, are a good team, right? And they're going back and forth. And what they did to Washington, right? Washington's out, and they're a good team also, right? So you look at how good our division is, and then you look at this Canadian division, right? And you look at what Montreal is doing to these other teams, to Toronto, now to Winnipeg. I've said this all year. I did not think that was a very deep division. I thought Toronto would struggle. I said this in the very beginning of the year because of the lack of struggle throughout the year. Once it comes to playoff time, when you're not ready for that, we saw that happen with Tampa Bay, right? When they weren't ready for that type of mindset, they were out in 4. Doesn't mean I don't think Toronto should blow up anything. I think they should take the loss, learn from it, come back at it again, play harder and harder and harder than you did before. But Montreal gave the Flyers a lot of trouble. We, and myself included, underestimated them. The Flyers still beat them, though. They played a hard-nosed game, and they still beat that team. Well, the way I see it is the Flyers in another division probably would have made the playoffs, even with the terrible way they played. But in a weaker division, it's a good chance they would have made the playoffs because they wouldn't have gotten as beat up on a regular basis by the level of competition they had. And not that they were our Stanley Cup team, I'm not saying that. But it does make me think that, hey, the Flyers are probably a little bit better than we think and probably a little more ready for the playoffs than we think. I just see a lot of people saying, oh, the Flyers will get annihilated in every series. I don't really think that's the case. I think the league is actually, has a lot more parity than we assume. And our division is just so tough. Like, I don't think Montreal would make the playoffs in our division. And I definitely don't think they'd be doing what they were doing in our division. Like, they can't do that to the Islanders. They can't do that to Boston, right? Do you agree with me in any sense? Like, do you see any kind of to show that, yeah, we got our butts kicked this year, but we got our butts kicked against good teams at least.
Yeah. The concern was the fact that we got blown out by Buffalo on multiple occasions.
Embarrassing loss to the Rangers, which is
it's embarrassing losses to Rangers. We ended Buffalo's 18-game winless streak. We ended New Jersey's 9-game winless streak.
And then they beat us again.
Yeah. And I mean, they beat us, 3 out of 4 times? And it took overtime the first time, and we had to cut the miracle comeback in the third period to tie the game and force overtime. I think Buffalo beat us 6-1 twice. New York scored 15 goals or 16 goals in consecutive games against us. There was 9-7, I think. It
was some of the most pathetic hockey I've ever seen by the Flyers ever. That 9-0 loss, I still talk about. That was the worst hockey I've ever seen from a Flyers team.
Yeah, without question. But I mean, to your point, Montreal, they wouldn't have made the playoffs in this division. They barely made the playoffs in the division they were in, which I agree with you was the softest division, in the NHL. Maybe the Flyers aren't quite as bad on most nights. There were some nights where they just
horrendous, the right word. It's fair to call them that. Yeah. And I think it was also the level of competition. Our division is just more prepared. Even the Rangers, they were more prepared to play us. You know what I mean? Remember when Knobloch was coaching? That's when we lost that 9-1 game. They were just fired up. It's a simple thing of fired up energy. They were just pushing through our players. That's not a talent thing. You know what I mean? The Montreal Canadiens are not the most talented team in that division. You know what I mean? But there is a mindset that you have to get into to win. You know what I mean? And we didn't have it this year. And I think the Canadiens, they're able to turn it on. They do have Claude Julien, who is a coach who's known for doing that, right? And I think that is what I take away the most from these playoffs is the Flyers need to be hungrier because you can beat almost any team. And, the Canadiens are kind of showing that they did that to us, right? And we were a superior team that year too. They almost beat us, right?
Yeah.
They gave it to us hard. And this year they're playing teams that are a little bit, they had a softer ride in, right? And they didn't have they got to Toronto and Toronto collapsed, right? That could have happened to the Flyers the year before. Toronto has a ton of talent, right? Everybody's like, oh, do we trade everybody now? But it shows that mindset is severely impressive. And the one thing I will say is that Carter Hart played out of his mind for us in the playoffs. And he at least played as well as Carey Price. But I will say the Montreal Canadiens fans were not happy with Price going to the playoffs. So we have to remember that ourselves. Like, don't freak out. The talent is here. It's like the team needs to play better overall. And I don't know. For me, it just makes me think overall, like, don't blow this up. Like, you don't need to blow up your team, but you do need to make adjustments without a doubt.
I mean, this team, unfortunately, has been, in this cycle of not succeeding for a decade now.
It's like the alternative. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Jekyll and Hyde.
Even when they make the playoffs, up until last year, they lost. I mean, they hadn't won a series since 2012. But I mean, and getting back to your point about, being hungry again this year in like 70% of the games that we gave up the first goal. And this has been a year after year after year again issue.
I know.
It's like, how does
outside of last year or the previous season? Yeah. And again, I don't think that's a reflection of Giroux. I think he's actually the hungry one. It's why I wonder why isn't it stemming to the rest of the team? And that's why I always look at coaching when I go to that, but it can't be AV. I have such a hard time believing that it's AV's fault, So I'm interested to see how they rebound, but I wanted to take a little bit of positivity from the Canadian success to be like, hey, like, this was a team that we all underestimated the previous year and said, oh, the Flyers almost lost to a garbage team, but they're obviously not a garbage team. They're obviously a team that when push comes to shove, they compete. Like, look at Joel Armia is obviously better than people anticipate. Like, a lot of these guys are better than people think. And there's obviously a way to be built for the playoffs. And the one thing I will say is that size, and I've said this over again, size definitely matters in the NHL. Everybody says that it doesn't. It 100% does. It just matters in certain positions. Like, you don't need your wingers to all be huge, right? But you need your defensemen to be big. You know what I mean? All right.
Speed matters.
Oh, go ahead.
Too.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I mean, this is where the Flyers. I mean, the Flyers don't have speed, but they're not big. So.
Well, it's funny because our fastest player, arguably, was injured all year. So I'm interested to see if now he lost a lot of time, but Morgan Frost is very fast. He should, I don't know if they're going to shift him over to the wing. I think they might do that for next season. But, I think that there are some opportunities with the younger guys to bring in some extra speed, but it will have to be, I think the transition game is what makes them look slower. You know what I mean? The fact that, like, you were talking about the passes outside of the zone, if those are not cleaned up, you're talking about when AMAC was here, right? And we were screaming at this team for not having talent. And really a lot of times is like, we got to get that puck out of our zone clean. And it just wasn't happening. Let's
look what the Islanders did to us in the playoffs last year. I mean, we could not get out of we would spend 10 minutes in our own defensive zone.
Yeah.
We just could not get out of our own end. And all year long, I mean, and again, I swear, every defender except for Ghost has completely taken carrying the puck up ice out of their game. They all get the puck, they stop, they look around for somebody to pass it to instead of just getting the puck and going.
Yeah,
Myers was great at that. He was awesome in juniors, and he would do that in the AHL. And the first while when he came up, he was doing it. Last year he was doing that, but suddenly this year, all of a sudden, he stopped carrying the puck and he would just stand still and look for somebody to pass to.
Yeah, I think because even the previous year he had a lot of turnovers that way, which is fine by me, to be honest with you, because again, you're talking about being risky. It's the same thing Voracek gets harped on. If you're a puck moving guy, you're going to have turnovers. Yeah. But at a season where there was no team support, I think it all stemmed from like them not trusting one another. I kept saying like the Mighty Ducks thing, like ducks fly together type of thing. They were not flying together. Like you very rarely saw them move up as a unit, execute really nice plays. Like it just wasn't there. And I think it made everybody hesitate. Now Ghost had something to prove. And honestly, he's kind of the veteran. Yeah. So he's failed so many times. I think in his mind, he's kind of like, I'm still going to play my game. They're going to bench me regardless for random reasons, which I still don't understand. So I think we saw a little bit of that. We'll see next year what if this happens again, because next year there's no more excuses. They will have practice. You will have a normal year. So no more excuses with any of this. And that includes AV as well. You will have the practice time. You'll have the off season. And I think next year's the last real opportunity that if something big doesn't happen, that's where the team goes, all right, we're going for another superstar. Right. Like I think this year we have an opportunity, like we might not go for a superstar, even though I'd like to see it on defense, to be honest, because we have the assets to do it.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't happen, I do expect big changes after this year. They won't go teeter-totting back and forth, or 2 years of being. They won't do it. There's no reason to do it. There's too many assets in this organization. You have to do something. You can't continue because you're going to lose money. You're going to lose fanfare. It can't happen anymore. All right, let's move on to the next topic real quick because I want to get into your article. So Sandstrom is leaving for HCTPS in Finland. He leaves on a 1-year deal. This was surprising to some extent, but when you look at the numbers game and you look at the fact that the Flyers are bringing in Ersan, Ustimenko is going to be healthy. They might bring back Alex Lyon to supplement, looks like probably for Sandstrom leaving. And Sandstrom apparently wants to be a number one guy and a guarantee of that. He wasn't going to get that with the Phantoms because, quite frankly, Ustimenko might be better. And honestly, Ersan might be better. So he might have actually lost that spot to them as it is. But he did have a very good second half.
Yes.
What is your thought? Because I think Sandstrom is very talented. He's less technical than the other two guys I mentioned, especially Ersan. And that really matters at the pro level. But he has a lot of talent. He's a very agile goalie. What do you think about Sandstrom leaving? And I will say the Flyers do retain his rights, so he has an opportunity to go develop overseas, and they can always, bring him back over to the NHL at some point.
I mean, I was really disappointed. I think that the starter job for the Phantoms was his to lose. Ustimenko missed the entire year. Ersan's coming over, never having played the North American game.
Mm-hmm.
The way that, the last 6-7 or so games, Sandstrom was absolutely, almost,
Lights out.
Yeah, nothing was getting by him. And with McIntyre not coming back, I mean, and Bill Meltzer posted this morning, it's like he was number 3 in the pecking order, and I agree with that. I was really surprised and bummed because I was finally, the kid's going to really get a shot. He's playing well. It's opening up for him. It looks like it's his job to lose, and then boom, he's gone. I don't know.
Yeah, I think those are very valid points too, especially with Ersan never playing North American game, right? Ustimenko missing a significant amount of time, even though I would argue he was ahead of Sandstrom before getting injured, right? But yeah, definitely an injury is definitely going to cause that. I would say he probably got offered more money. That's my thought. He probably got offered more money to go play in Finland. I don't know about the tax situation. I don't know their tax as well, but he probably offered probably a complete starting role where he didn't have to compete. Is the leagues are comparable, so it's not like he's playing against tougher competition necessarily, because AHL's got that level of talent as well. So it is interesting. I maybe there was some bad blood from him starting in the ECHL, which he probably didn't expect to do. Exactly. I mean, going back, I know I'm getting distracted here, but no, it's all right.
Going into camp last year, he played in one of the first games, and he was dynamite. And then he didn't play again in camp. And he went down. And next thing you know, he's in the ECHL. It's like, what the hell is going on? Why is he down in the ECHL? He's supposed to be, the next prospect in the pecking order. So that could certainly be an issue, because it seemed like he just did not get a shot, last year from camp, and then going into the season for the Phantoms.
Yeah. And it's also interesting. I wonder if maybe he looks at a guy like Carter Hart and goes, well, I'm not going to take his spot. So I'm not going to be an NHL starter, and the most I'll be an NHL backup, and maybe he was kind of like, well, if I go over there and just kind of, because, in negotiation, there's always the leverage of walking away.
Yeah.
Right. And that is his leverage, is saying, well, if you guys want a different deal in the future, come let me know. Right. If you actually want me to be, at the very least, maybe a backup at the end, because they weren't going to give him the backup role at the NHL level. Right.
Oh, no, not right.
He wasn't getting that. And maybe that's what he wanted. Maybe it was, I want to be for sure the number 3 guy. Like I want to be the guy who's getting 60% of the game in the AHL, which they couldn't guarantee, right? Because they have 2 other guys they want to play. And then, I want a chance to be that call-up guy. And maybe the Flyers were considering bringing back Alain as well, because how many goalies do we have last year? Like, it just seems like maybe he's just like better off where I'm the guy. They sell my jersey over there. Everybody's excited about me. He still gets to play.
And Hart could have gotten injured a week into the season, and then he gets called up, and he's the backup to whoever the backup goalie is.
Yeah. It is interesting. I didn't expect him to leave either. But the good news is that we still retain his rights, and like Fedotov is obviously doing very well in the KHL.
He's a guy that I've been talking about for a while, and who I think it was Sam Carchidi or somebody wrote an article and they posted it, and they listed like the top 3 or 4 goalie prospects, and his name wasn't even on there. And I wrote back, I'm like,
crazy.
Excuse me, hello. There's a guy that's like dominating over in the KHL that we have, we have the rights to. It's like, did you guys just forget about him or what?
Yeah, probably. They probably did. I think the tough thing with him is that he can get paid more money. Unless he's coming in here to be the backup, which, he might be ready for that at a certain point. But unless he's coming in here to play in the NHL, I could see him being like, well, I'll just stay here and get paid. There's no taxes there.
But look at the guys that have come over, the Islanders got Sorokin, Samsonov with the Caps. Who's the other guy? Oh, the guy for the Rangers.
Georgiev. Shesterkin, Georgiev.
Yeah, and Georgiev. There's a lot of these Russian guys coming over from the KHL that are really playing well, and and he's at that spot. He's 25 years old. You would think that he could potentially make the transition and be the next guy that come over and start in a backup role. And next thing you know, he's the starter.
Yeah, I honestly think that the Flyers are very high on Ersson, and I think maybe that's kind of what. You got a Swedish player who recognizes another Swedish player, and Ersson is ahead of Samsonov where they were at the same age. So I think maybe he might see that as well, and maybe thinks, hey, I might not actually be the guy here. Like we assume that, but they might not be actually treating him like that internally. And Fedotov is a really interesting one because he obviously is killing it in the KHL. Like, let's be honest. And he's giant. So, and I think with that, it's like the Russian factor. Like the guy's going to be like, if I'm coming over, I want to be a pro. Otherwise, I'm playing in the second best league in the world. And I think that's kind of where it comes down to. And they have to offer him probably a backup role. And I don't think they're willing to do that with Carter Hart, being so young and whatnot. But we'll see. That's a guy that I could see. We're going to own the rights forever with him. That's a guy I could see maybe 28, 27. Flyers finally go, okay, come on over. We'll make it backup or whatever. Carter Hart's 25 or whatever. So
he is killing.
Yes.
And the last couple of years killing.
Yes. Yeah. At the very least, though, I will say you could always trade him for value. Not that I think we should, but he's got value. He's a pro goalie. So let's hope that doesn't happen. All right. And the other thing is Alex Lyon is rumored to maybe return. If that happens, that is not for an NHL backup. Is there anything that you see the Flyers doing, like NHL backup wise? Obviously, it's very difficult to predict what they're going to do.
Yeah. They certainly don't want. They can't. Well, they don't have any money to pay anybody that's really good,
right?
So you're looking at an older guy like a Jonathan Bernier, somebody like that,
1.5 million, 2 million a year, or something like that,
right? Because that's about all the money they're going to have, really.
Yep, and they're going to get 1 year deal, maybe 2.
Yeah, David. I put David Ritt on there.
Sure.
He had a bad. He didn't have a great season. So I had him as my backup in my cap-friendly roster, but other than that, they're not going to be able to pay $3-4 million for a backup goalie.
Yeah, I could see if somebody gets moved out, I could see them maybe doing that, but it's only going to be on a 1 year deal. Like it's not going to be a multi-year, and a lot of the better goalies are going to want a multi-year deal, especially if you're like 28, 29 years old.
Oh yeah, definitely.
You're not going to want a 1 year deal. So I agree with you. I think maybe that's why we heard the Jonathan Bernier rumors, because I think that's realistically the type of guy we're going to look for, a guy who's probably didn't have the best of season, but probably has a little more upside. Otherwise, I don't think they're bringing back Elliott. I think he's too old at this point for them to count on him. But they're going to look for like a Brian Elliott when we first brought him over. A
Right.
guy who's a little bit past his prime, but also good enough that we can play him. And maybe Alex Line is again the third string. I'm not so sure. I'm not sure Alex Line's coming back, to be honest, even though I really like him as a person quite considerably.
Oh yeah. But the other thing too is they have like 49 of the 50 allowable contracts signed right now. So they've got to get rid of some people if they want to start bringing these other guys into the fold and re-signing some of these guys, because there's just absolutely no room. Which really, like there was a guy, who was it, Millman, that they rushed out after the first week in the AHL and signed him to a two-way deal. And I was like, why?
I think that was an AHL contract, though. Was it, or was it two?
No, it was a two-way deal. They signed, because he was already signed to an AHL contract, and they signed him to a two-way deal starting next year. And I was like, wow, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Oh, and I also questioned the Jackson Cates deal. It was just another contract, and they just don't have a lot of room, And
I think a couple of those contracts, though, I think they're slide eligible still, right? Like I think because we're probably including Wisdom, and we're probably including, and they'll probably slide over, and Forrester, they'll probably slide back down. But to your point, I completely agree with you. There is a clog. I've said this quite a bit. There's a clog down the wing at the NHL level. Definitely on the left side, we have way too many NHL caliber left wingers. We have too many. Like we have this thing where like we have just a cluster of players that all have similar roles or all coming up at the same time. Like you got to make moves. You have to do something this offseason, without a doubt.
But and then getting into the pessimism, what if they can't move Jake or JVR? Then you're looking at the same team next year, basically. Morgan Frost will be up there, but they're not going to have money to bring in a top pair right-hand defenseman.
Well, let's get into it. Let's get into your article here. Let's end on this. Let's talk about Phil Myers. So you have an article is it out yet?
No, it's not. It's not.
Okay.
I still need to do some more proofing on it. But I wanted to at least have all the stats and everything out there. So one of the things that really bothered me going, when we got through the first couple of weeks going into the last, the third, maybe fourth week of March, it seemed like there was just started to be this swell of anti-Phil Myers sentiment that was showing up. It was showing up in some articles, it was showing up on blogs, and it was really showing up on Flyers Twitter. And I was pushing back. I was throwing some charts out there, showing stats and everything, showing that, look, you compare him to the rest of the Flyers D. I mean, he and Sanheim had almost an identical season. And I'm not talking about just 2 or 3 stats. I mean, across the board.
Yep.
He was not this horrible player. I mean, some of these guys were just saying, "Oh my God, he's horrible. He's the worst." You can get rid of him now. Just get anything for him. The guy's useless. And I'm thinking, holy crap! You got a 6'5" mobile right-hand D-man who's 20. He just turned 24 years old. The entire team sucks right now, and he's getting. It's like him and Ghost got all the hate, and they were the ones that were regularly getting scratched. Sanheim wasn't scratched once. He was minus 19. His stats were no better anywhere than Myers' stats were. So I wanted to, and then this kept kind of going, and I kept pushing back and fighting with people on Twitter. So I decided, okay, I'm going to do an in-depth look at what Phil Myers' season looked like compared to his fellow defense corps on the Flyers, as well as looking at some comparables among other young right-handed defensemen that have a few seasons in the NHL now. So when I looked at the stats with the rest of the Flyers defense corps, I got to put my glasses on for this because I can't see behind this back. So and this will be, I'll publish this tomorrow most likely. And what I did is where applicable, I did an 82 game run rate for things. So he would have had, based on his performance, 21 points. He finished the season minus 10. He would have had basically 130 hits, 75 blocks. The 130 hits may put him second only to Robert Haig. And he does need to do a better job blocking shots because he was on the low end on the shot blocks. However, this will probably be a surprise. He had the second highest Corsi percentage on the Flyers D, only 0.10 behind Sanheim. He was 54.0, Sanheim was 54.1, and he had a Corsi rel of 1.9. So he was making the guys on the ice better when he was out there, and most of the rest of the guys had a negative one. He also had the best turnover to takeaway ratio on the Flyers. He had 27 turnovers, but he had 19 takeaways for a ratio of 1.4. Provorov had a ratio of 11.2. Haig was 4. Braun was 4.4. So, again, just kind of looking across here, his performance was, again, with everybody being down on the season, but his performance was solid. His goals against per 60 was a weak area, and he and Sanheim, again, were identical. They were at the bottom of the Flyers defense pair. They were both about 3.5. One stat that I found, there's a website out there that compiles some other interesting stats you don't see everywhere. And one of the things that I pulled into this chart was controlled zone entry defense. And Phil Myers had the best. He was ranked in the 87th percentile on defending controlled zone entries for the Flyers. The next best one was Ghost in the 76th percentile, and Proby was 68. So, again, looking across these stats, Myers was not horrible. He was not the worst beat that the Flyers had. He played well, comparable to what the rest of the defense corps did. So then I wanted to see, okay, so let's pick some other names and see, how he stacked up against them. So I looked at Brandon Carlo from Boston, Dante Fabro from Nashville, Travis Dermott from Toronto, Jacob Larson from Anaheim, and then I threw in Ryan Pulock, who has a couple more years and a lot more games experience. The other guys are all pretty similar in age and games, although Carlo, he had more games as well. So looking at that in hits, Myers was second there. Again, he was low on the blocks, but again, he had the second best Corsi percentage, and he had the second best Corsi relative. Only Ryan Pulock had a better number at 4.2. Again, he had he and Brandon Carlo were basically tied on the turnover to takeaway ratio. But some of the other guys, like Travis Dermott was 6.8, Larson was 6.0, Pulock was 3.6. And as far as goals for per 60, he was right up there near. He was at 2.6. Pulock was 2.7. Everybody else was below that. The goals against per 60 again was his weak spot. Everybody else was basically, for the most part in the 2 range, 2.1, etc. But again, when you looked at that other metric of defending controlled zone entries, he had the second highest here. Travis Dermott was at 95. Carlo had the next best at 74. Pulock was only at the 43rd percentile. and Larson was way down at the 19th percentile. So you look at guys where that are his peers, right-hand defensemen that have similar experience in the NHL, and guys that have much more experience in Ryan Pulock and a decent number of more games in Brandon Carlo. Myers stacked up nicely against these guys. So this whole narrative that Myers was this horrible, and I saw the rate they ranked they ranked the entire Flyers team, and Myers was given a D-, and I'm like, okay, this is just insane. So I had to do an article and try to set the record straight. I tend to root for the underdogs. I was always a great Chen defender back in the day. Everybody was always like, "Oh, all he does is score power play goals."
Oh, all he does.
I mean, it was a great thing, but it was like it was a negative thing that he scored on the power play. Oh,
he also was a hell of a hitter, a hell of a forward checker.
Yes,
and play all three positions.
And I did the charts of the years that he was there. He was third because I think it was Drew and Kuzer basically tied for primary assists, and he was like the next best guy for primary assists. He was right up there in goals over the 4 or 5 years, whatever he was there. His stats were actually pretty freaking good. I mean, especially considering what he got paid.
Yeah, and look what we got for him in a trade. We didn't get we got Frost and Farabee. It's like and he won a cup immediately when he was traded, playing on the top line. Like
centering the top line. Yes. That's a play center here.
So here, and I think actually we're seeing the same type of pattern here with him and Phil Myers. And I agree. First of all, I have no interest in even hearing that Phil Myers is bad. None at all. He also was dealing with some injuries this year as well.
Yes.
Which is why primarily he got benched. More that than any other reason, in my opinion. Where I think Kevin Hayes should have been benched because of his injury. They should have shut him down early, but that's a different topic. But I think it's the goals that he gave up when he was on the ice. They were all very poorly timed goals. They weren't his fault. I will say this over and over again. A lot of times
they were killers.
And it was typically that back door would be open. But again, and yes, I can jump on him for that. But it's not like he played bad the entire game.
It's not like the other guys weren't doing the same thing too.
I'm exactly there with you. I think it's a consequence of one of those things where people just look at the last man there and go, "Ha, he's the problem," and everybody wants the scapegoat. And realistically, like I actually was listening to Lappy. Let's go back to Lappy. He was being interviewed on Daily Faceoff, and they brought up Phil Myers. Martinez brought up Phil Myers. Go, what do you think about Phil Myers? And he immediately went like, "Hey, like just relax, like just." We told him he's going to have a good off season. He's going to have a real off season where he's going to get to practice. He's like, he's a good player. Like, just give him time. And I think the reality is like this team needs to play well, and everybody's numbers will go back up because Phil Myers, the fact that people are looking at Phil Myers a throwaway, and I was mentioning this, I think off camera to you, that is the guy that I think we'd have to give up in a Seth Jones trade, not because I want to get rid of him, but because they're going to be like, okay, well, if you want our big, strong right side defenseman, we want yours. Right. And he's not as good as Seth Jones. We could say that. He definitely doesn't have the resume, but he has the potential of still being a top pairing guy. He played with Thomas Chabot. Look how good Chabot is. Like, this is a guy, just let him work through this stuff where really ultimately his role on this team is top pairing defender. And if they can play him with Ivan Provorov, that would be great. They're just the same age, and we don't have a veteran up there to really play. We might have that problem with Seth Jones as well to some degree, which nobody discusses. But I will say this. I mean, I agree with you. I think the numbers are interesting breakdown. And I actually didn't know the Corsi there and that it's relative to the rest of the team. But that's what I saw. What I saw is, hey, yeah, Phil Myers not having his best year, but I'm seeing everybody kind of have a bad year. So I don't like harping. And again, I'm going to defend Nolan Patrick. People hate this. And yes, he did not play well this year. I would argue because he wasn't ready for the season. And that's why him and Lindblom were at the bottom of the lineup like majority of the time. But ultimately, when I see somebody struggle, I go, okay, is he the only one struggling or is everybody struggling? And when I see everybody, I go, okay, well, then I'm not going to harp on the young guy. You know what I mean? I'm not going to be like, oh, okay. if the rest of the D did amazing and Phil Myers didn't, I'd be like, okay, we have a conversation here. That is not what we saw. We saw a team struggle as a whole. Defensively, I kept saying the team defense is not on the defenseman. It's on all 5 guys on the ice, and it was horrendous this year. So to jump on Phil Myers, I think is crazy. And I would even argue that his numbers with a team playing well will probably be exceptional, and he can get to the same level that a lot of these guys that we all covered around the league. He can hit those numbers too, but the team has to play well together as a unit.
Yeah, look at him last year. You know, he had the best plus minus amongst all rookie defensemen.
Yep.
He ended the season plus 17.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he and Sanheim were a great shutdown pair out there. Yep. They both can move the puck. They can both shoot. I didn't go into this, but I did a 3-year chart for both of them from that tool, showing shot contribution, controlled zone entries for them. And again, and looking at those, the only one where there was really any real separation was defending the controlled zone entries coming the other way, where Sanheim was much, much weaker than Phil Myers was. But on the shot generation, on assist shots, they were pretty similar. On carrying the puck into the carrying the puck out of their own zone and then carrying the puck into the offensive zone, they were pretty similar numbers. Both good, up way above 50%. So yeah.
Yeah, no, and again, when they played well, when Sanheim and Myers played well, both of them, the team played well. Nobody was talking about getting rid of Phil Myers. Nobody was talking about getting rid of Sanheim. Nobody was talking about blowing up this team. So I think it's important to kind of wait and see, because a lot of this stuff is, and there is a rule, and I forget who I was talking to about this, but there's like kind of a rule out there. You got to let a kid play, like defensemen. They have to play like 300 games in the NHL to really learn the NHL game, and he's not there yet.
He's got 115 games.
It's nothing. It's literally nothing. So we have no idea what he's going to be. Plus, he's a very big defenseman. He's going to take time. And actually, what I thought was most interesting about your stats here, the hits. So he actually had more hits than Justin Braun. He had the same amount of block shots as Robert Haig, who's supposed to be a shot block guy, right? And yeah, Haig has hits and whatnot. I'm not knocking Haig here, but I mean, if you ask me, who do you want, Haig and Braun for the future, or Braun for the future versus Myers? I mean, he's easily holding on to Myers, right?
Yeah,
of those two guys. And Braun had a good year, but I think if Niskanen was still here and Myers would have been able to get a little more sheltering time on that right side, we probably wouldn't have noticed it, a lot of these issues. And I think that's kind of key to bringing in another, right side defenseman.
They've got to have a vet right shot D guy to play with Proby, and then let Anaheim. And I said this, I've said this several times, that if I was the Fletcher and the coaching staff, I would tell Sanheim and Myers, do not show up to camp with less than 10 pounds of muscle on your frame. Where Sanheim, I don't. Some of these don't make any sense, because like every single NHL website shows Sam Morin at 202 pounds, which is not feasible.
No.
But
I think he's 245 or something like that.
But they show Sanheim at 6'3", 185, and
he's a
Myers at 6'5", like 210, I think.
Yeah,
so they could both put on at least 10 to 15 pounds of muscle, and that would really help their game. And I
don't think those numbers are accurate, but I agree with you.
I don't know how accurate those are, but but Sanheim does look like a stick. He's skinny.
He always was, but even when he was drafted, that was his problem. He had very slim shoulders. It was always that he had to be bigger and stronger. Now, Phil Myers has more of like that Braden Coburn type of like nastiness to him, and that's kind of what I want to see from him. But I completely agree with you. Those two guys are, and I think we heard that kind of in the exit interviews. And that's what I think the Lappy move is all about, is that if I was the GM and the coaching staff, I say, the goal of this team is that we are going to be the strongest and the most physically strong as they can be, and the most conditioned team in the league. Like, I don't care if we have the most talent. It doesn't matter. You guys better add muscle. I don't want to ever see you get out-muscled in front of the net.
Yeah.
Like that's the message. It obviously is going to happen to a degree, right? You have to forgive when they make mistakes, but the goal is that Phil Myers, you were 6'5". There's nobody smaller than you should be pushing you out of the way almost ever. And these are the things that I would set as expectations. Is I want strong, fast, everything. Like you need to be in the best shape of everybody in your division.
Make it work out with Provorov. Provorov is a monster. If they do his routine over the summer, oh my God, can you imagine?
Well, I completely, yeah. And this is what I'm talking about. And I think a lot of people don't understand this because they assume all athletes are the same. But like there's a maturity level that comes. Like Joel Farabee gained 10 pounds of muscle in a year when nobody else did. Like he went into this season. He's a kid. He's a young guy. He's like, I know exactly what I'm going to do. I know it. York did the same thing. I know exactly what I'm going to do. I have my way. It showed immediately. JVR, I remember he told everybody we have to be more prepared. He's a guy who wasn't that prepared, right, with the child and everything. But he came back. He knew what to do. That means the other guys, they probably don't know as well what to do training-wise. How to get big. Okay, go find a new trainer then. Yeah. I would literally, like, if I was Fletcher, and I put this on him, like, you guys need
it's not on them. He needs to give them that guidance and say, here, this is...
Yes. Yes. And that's where I do think the Lappy addition, I think that's what it represents, is that they're like, well, we might, we have the talent, at least they believe we have the talent internally, so we need to get the most out of them. And the way to do that is conditioning. Like I tell the people all the time, like I exercise all the time. Is very difficult to progress. And you have a short window to progress, really, because you're not doing it during the season. So like they have to be super methodical, and this offseason is so important for so many of them. And Nolan Patrick, I include in this as well. Nolan Patrick.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
He has to have an incredible offseason. You have to show up in the. Do you remember this? You'll remember this. Do you remember right before Jeff Carter became Jeff Carter? And I'm talking about like going from being a 20 goal scorer to being like a 30 to 40 goal scorer. I remember even Bill Clement talking about this. Like Jeff Carter was in the best shape of his life, and I remember he's like, he looks like a Greek god. I remember him saying,
"Yeah, I remember that."
And Jeff Carter exploded physically. He took off from there, like immediately. Jake Voracek, same thing. He was meddling in his middle 20s, and then he came in the best shape of his life, and then boom, blew the doors off, and everybody went, "What
point season?" Yeah,
right. And they said, "What did you change?" He goes, "Oh, I stopped eating my mom's food."
Yep.
What he actually did is he got super regimented, and if I remember this, he started working out with Chris Letang, who at the time was a great athlete already. So he changed his trainer. These are the things they have to do. You need to. Giroux never has this problem.
Yeah,
he does not. He does not. Maybe an injury, but he's not a physical freak either. Like he's a guy who puts in the work. Like they need everybody to look at what Joel Farabee did, who I think is a future captain, and be like, hey, this guy represents the level of work you need to put in. Provorov, this guy represents. If we don't see you holding this extent, we're not making it anywhere. We're not getting out of the first round. Even if we get in, we're not getting out. Like right now, actually, Boston is losing to the Islanders. Why does Barry Trotz do this to teams? Because his level of expectations are you better be in the best shape. Even Ken Hitchcock was like that. Ironically, for a guy who was never in shape, he had that mentality though, that your team, we are never getting outworked any night. And I think that is the most important thing. And by the way, the Canadians are up 2-0 right now. So they're about to sweep. They're about to sweep the Jets. So that's
well. Imagine if Carolina doesn't sign Brindamore. Maybe we could get Brindamore as the coach. I mean, because he's probably he's in better shape than any of his players.
100%. I think that's the idea with Lappy, is that Lappy is also is the type of guy where like, hey, you can't show up to camp where your coach is in better shape than you.
Yeah.
And with Brindamore, that could be the case. Like he'll come in and he'll skate circles around you at 50, or I think he's close to 50, right? He's like in his late 40s. And I completely agree. That's the type of leadership that I personally like, is like lead by example. And it's very hard to find a coach like Brindamore. I think if he does leave, he'll get snagged up like that.
Oh yeah, without question.
Yeah, he's a good leader. All right, we're at time. Kevin, this was a really fun one, actually, and thank you for bringing up your article. Tell people where they can follow you. Let people know when you think the article will be out, and anything else.
You can follow me on Twitter at KS Fortier, and my website is flyersfaceoff.com. I'll be posting the article, like I said, tomorrow.
Cool.
And there's also a webpage or a Twitter page for the show. It's at Flyers Faith. I think it got cut off. So or Flyers Face O. It wasn't enough letters.
That's all right. All right. Well,
but man, this was a blast. I really enjoyed this. I really appreciate you having me on tonight.
For sure. We'll have you back on. I'll definitely have you back on the show. Maybe we'll get you on more of a group environment. Awesome. Next time. We can do a little more debating. Yeah, make sure to follow Kevin online. You will have the article. I'll retweet your article too when it comes out. Okay. But I will have an article out for this episode as well. Usually do like a brief write-up so it makes it to Bleacher. But yeah, no, thanks again for joining. Thank you everybody for listening, for writing. I've been getting a lot of like personal messages, just like thanking us and like saying how much you love what we're doing. So thank you so much. It means so much. Because, you guys see me battling people on Twitter. I'm not going to stop doing that. And just like Kevin's defending Phil Myers, I will keep defending all of these guys because, like I say all the time, I play the long game. So just because I see a player struggle does not mean I think that is what a player is. And I recommend doing that yourselves because usually the long game is the one that wins. But thank you for everybody for listening. Like, subscribe, comment, do all that stuff. Share it out if you can. That's always a humongous help as well. Appreciate all of you so much. And remember to always stay gritty.